Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Sutters here. It's an afternoon Word Balloon, matinee, if you will, accommodating the global audience. I'm hoping that our friends overseas, Tom, are watching us as well as our national friends as well. But happy to welcome Tom Kelly to Word Balloon. Good to see you, Tom.
Hey, folks. How's everybody doing today?
Tom, we're going to talk about a Kickstarter that you got going, Fist Frank. And to start things off, I am going to play your Kickstarter commercial. So I'm going to take us out of the stream and let everybody watch that for a second and enjoy all the details about Foot Fist Way, a new Kickstarter campaign from our own Tom Kelly.
Hi, I'm Tom Kelly. I'm a Chicago comic book artist and illustrator, and I need your support. I need your support to fund my martial arts action-adventure graphic novel, The Foot Fist Frankenstein. Foot Fist Frankenstein is a 120-page hardcover revenge story, kind of like John Wick meets the Hulk a la Kung Fu Theater. The story of Foot Fist Frankenstein is that of a monster who, after finally finding peace, has it cruelly ripped away, and then the path of vengeance he then undertakes. It's an exciting and visually dynamic tale of a martial arts monster and his quest to get payback. Everything is ready to go. All I need is the money to get the book made. This is where you come in. I've done all the art, gotten a printer, the shipping supplies. I have the whole book ready to print. With your support, I can raise the money to fund my dream. You see, over the years, I've made comics, illustrations, and art for a lot of other publishers, companies, and other people. But my lifelong dream has been to make my own comic book. Now, with your support, you can help me realize my creative vision. Thanks.
There we are, my man. Very nice. Foot Fist Frankenstein. Excellent. Very, very cool. Fun idea. And no, Tom, you're a convention vet. You travel the country at the very least, and I understand too that it's probably a weird time as far as income and everything. And as far how are you handling COVID in terms of keeping the income coming in?
Well, I'm a little bit fortunate in that I don't rely 100% like for conventions to be a big part of my income. So I've always hustled very much to get work, whether they're commissions or entertainment or advertising jobs. So I have a consistent record with those people that I still am getting work from. Plus, I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, like right around Scranton, and my father was, he was older. He was from the silent generation. So he taught me the importance of having like a war chest that you never touch until the absolute worst case scenario hits. And lo and behold, 1% of the time he's right. And I'm like, okay, so I do have a certain amount of savings accrued up that I squirreled away for years and years. So I'm doing all right, which I'm very pleased about. But it's like, whoa, okay, who knew, my dad's Depression era mindset would come into practice. Like,
yeah, man. No, I hear you. I know. I keep saying I wish my my father and some of my older relatives who lived through the war years could really, kind of tell us what it was like in having to deal with something like this. And it's a shame because, I think it would be better, I think there'd be more of a unifying spirit if that generation were still around and it was closer to their time.
I think I definitely know there'd be a lot more energy coming out, saying we've done it before, we can do it again. I mean, my dad would tell me when he was a kid about how they used to have victory gardens, and that was them, in their neighborhood in like Scranton.
Sure.
That's how they had like fresh vegetables because everything was rationed, everything was difficult to get.
Yeah. No, you couldn't buy a car during the war years. Obviously,
no.
gasoline was rationed.
Well, I mean,
butter was rationed. Butter.
Yeah.
I mean, something as basic as that.
Chocolate, Hershey bar.
Yep.
So we're very lucky in that aspect that even though we've had shortages, we haven't had really massive problems with really mostly anything. We've just had to sort of wait maybe a week or 4 weeks to get something.
Yeah.
So,
well, anyway, on to the Kickstarter campaign, Fist Frankenstein. It looks great, and I'm glad that things are ready. You're just really looking for kind of printing costs to kind of cover things.
Yeah, that was a concern of mine from the very outset. Like you, I've been around comics and comic creators and a veteran of the comic book convention scene for over 20 years now. And so I know all the horror stories of fans not getting their Kickstarter rewards, as well as the creators doing a Kickstarter and making like 27 bad mistakes. So one of the things I was adamant about was I was going to have all the work done before I launched the campaign. That way, all I have to do is then raise the funds and then literally tell the printer, my printer's in Canada, and I'd just tell them like, push the button, like turn the press on and let's go. And then it's just like getting it, physically made and then shipped to me. And then I just fulfill the rewards and send them out. Like, that's
great.
Yeah. From listening to people like Ryan Brown and my buddies like Dane Doherty and Henri Compin and Trevor Moeller and Tim and Mike Norton.
Celia Norton, yeah.
Yeah, just a ton of all that crew. Like, you learn even just through casual bar conversations, like what they really regret that was a pain in the ass and what they're really thankful for, like doing. Like, oh, I didn't know this, but this was huge,
Are you, is it available for international purchase as well? I mean, I know that's one of the kind of concerns, obviously, is international shipping and mail costs.
Yeah. I'll put it to you like this. I set the Kickstarter so that the physical copies would only be available in the United States. But if anyone who does want the book contacts me through the Kickstarter page and says, hey man, I really want the book or this reward, can you send it to London or Australia or wherever? I'm totally willing to do that. I just didn't want to make a quote for a shipping rate that maybe 5 months from now might be totally different.
Absolutely.
Or even worse, it might be set in like, it might have an extended period internationally to like ship something off and to clear customs because of just the way the world is right now. So obviously I offered people a really cool, like robust digital option, which is actually exclusive to the Kickstarter. Like later on, I'll want to like release this online through like Comixology and other digital comics portals, but those portals won't get the actual Kickstarter version of the book. They'll get like a standard version of the graphic novel. They won't have all the extra like bells and whistles that I packed in specifically because I know you look at shipping for like, say like Australia, right? It might be 3 times the cost of the book. And I'm like, man, like I don't want to do that to people. Plus, if I'm wrong figuring out that shipping by like $5 or something, like that's a lot of money I either have to eat or come back to that person later going like, can you give me like 30 more bucks, man? And nobody wants that. Like,
no, absolutely not.
You look like a goon when you do it too. It's like,
yeah.
So if you are international and you just want to look at the book and get your hands on it, I made a digital version, and the digital version is pretty awesome because I made the digital version slightly different from the print version.
Get into detail. Yeah.
So the print version has like double page spreads. It has like 6 double page spreads in it, right? But I don't like on digital how double page spreads work.
Sure.
So I made those in the digital version splash pages.
Okay.
And in many ways, and in a couple cases, I actually literally redrew the page to make sure the storytelling matched.
That's great.
So you really are getting a slightly alternate, different version of the paper book in the digital format. Plus, I did like an alternative cover for the digital version. And even some of the pinups and extra bonus material is exclusive only to that version.
That's great.
So I tried to make that special from the outset, because I know internationally, like, I don't know if I could like ship to Alaska or outer Mongolia or wherever. Like, that might just be too expensive. Like, am I going to say, oh, sure, pay me $150 to send a $30 book to you? Like, that's insane.
Is Alaska different than the lower 48?
Yeah. Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, Mexico. Pretty much once you get out of the continental United States, it all like goes up. And it fluxes too. Like, shipping rates change. Like, if I go and get a quote now, there's no guarantee three months from now that it's going to be the same amount of money. It's probably going to go up.
Right.
And that's where that's where a ton of people, like, I interviewed like 6 different creators, like Gene Ha, Henri Compton, Trevor Moeller, Dan Doherty, Brian Brown. Like, I sat there with a big sheet of like 50 questions.
Sure.
And it was like, tell me about Kickstarter. Like, what did you like? What didn't you like? And they all really came back with like fulfillment and shipping. And we're like, okay, like, make sure you research this, because here are all the problems you can face. And I was like, and it's nice because I asked so many people, I got a great consensus from because like Gene has a big following. Like, he's worked for DC and Marvel. So his perspective in Kickstarter, like, his realistic expectations and goals are different from an indie person.
Absolutely.
So you have to keep that in mind. Like, you're not competing with Jimmy Palmiotti. Like, you're not. I'm not. I'm just trying to get my book made. That's it.
Well, and I don't even think it's competition per se, because it is like, it's a different market. And since its inception, crowdfunding comics has been very fascinating to follow. Yeah. And as creators learn, as you say, as they've gone along. And I hearing the creators that you've turned to, I think they're a great group, and I think a good cross section. Brownie is one of those guys that I always am blown away by his success and organization, and I think he's a great.
He was on Kickstarter pretty early too.
Yes, absolutely. And like you say, and then like people like Gene Ha, Jimmy Palmiotti, and stuff. Paul Jenkins is another guy that I just talked to, and he's coming back with a new volume. And those mainstream creators that have a built-in fan base, that's different. It is interesting though that Kickstarter itself is its own comics community, and that they really are like interested in supporting other books. And also this entire time, especially during COVID, it's been very fascinating to watch people with their creator-owned stuff and choosing alternative avenues as opposed to Diamond and comic stores to get their books out there.
Yeah, that whole landscape changed. And for me, like, when I was from the inception of Fist Frankenstein and doing it as a book, I always knew I was going to self-publish it and do that through Kickstarter, from day one, because I know the deal, like, back, 4 years ago, I knew the deal that you had to have with Diamond, like the threshold of like how much money and how many units you actually have to have for them to even touch you, right? Then I know like there's like maybe 300 comic shops in the United States, and you really have to get them to order out of the Diamond catalog your book. You really almost have to like call them and develop a relationship with every one of them, and it's so hard.
Yeah. Well, it's time consuming. Yeah.
It's time consuming, and but it builds momentum, right? Because like once your few couple books and projects start catching fire, or at least they see them come out and know that like you're not a flake, then they're much more willing to do stuff with you. Well, I mean, that's why people go to Image or a known publisher, because
Sure.
they know those books are going to come out.
I hear you, man. Here, Sean has a good Canadian question.
Sure.
Have you considered partnering with a Canadian comic shop to fulfill books in Canada?
I would love to. Like I said, I don't have such deep connections with especially international comic shops. I mean, I know when we say Canada, there are neighbors to the north, so it doesn't seem like it's international, but they are.
Sure.
I would love to do it, and if anybody wants to send me a link, I'd be more than happy to work with a British comic shop, an English comic shop, because again, it's easier for me to get the books to them in one big package and have them disseminate it in their region rather than me try to individually send it out to people. Like, it's too expensive for me as a small individual to send people. I mean, I had a friend in England, and he's like, "Hey man, I'd like to get this book, and can I order it? I'm willing to pay the extra shipping." And I was like, "Hey, that's great, but why don't you ask around other nerds and geeks in England and see if you guys can team up together? Because
Sure.
if I send just one or two people a big box that they can break and then send off to other people, it's so much better for them. Like, they won't spend nearly as amount of money."
Yeah, and that's what Sean is basically suggesting as well. You can drop ship a portion of the books to the Canada shop. Sean, maybe you have a shop in mind, because I do love the fact that the Canadian market seems to be much more open to creator owned. That's been my perception.
I mean, I'll put it to you this way: the printer's really nice. They're very professional. They're a printer that prints a lot of DC books and stuff up in Canada, and they've been pretty much a very painless process to deal with. What I needed to do to organize files and things like that, they were very helpful. And again, this is my first time, so I'm asking every stupid question twice. Sure. I'm like, "Hey, it's looking like this on the screen. It's not going to print like that, right? Okay." And yeah, so because I mean, I used to work in printing when I first graduated from college.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give a brief rundown origin story for everybody.
Yeah, do it, bud. Sure.
I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, right outside of Scranton. So that's right, Matt Kelly, Clark Summit. That's where I grew up. I went to Lycoming College in Williamsport, PA, which is the home of the Little League World Series, for those people who don't know that. I studied graphic design there. After I graduated, I worked for 2 years in Pennsylvania doing graphic design. I worked for Keystone Printing. I think they're in Dallas, PA, which was right up the road from where my parents lived, 15, 20 minutes. And there I worked on everything. I did pencil wraps and chocolate, candy boxes. I worked for RCA Records out of them. I actually laid out the Wu-Tang Clan CDs.
Hilarious.
Which spell check is impossible. When you're trying to speak hip-hop slang, spell check is not your friend. I would just I would get the brief, I would work on it, I would fax it off to the A&R rep, and the rep would be like, "Okay, you got to make these corrections." I'm like, "All right." And then I fax it off again, and then it would come back, and they would fax it off again and come back. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. I mean, the country singers were great. It was like, "I've lost my dog in my truck." I'm like, "Okay,
that's easy.
I got that."
Hilarious. That's awesome, man.
Then I ended up working for the phone book company, the Donnelly Directory, which was a rival to the Bell Yellow Pages.
Okay. I
did that for a year. I basically made ads. I worked and I laid out Chinese menu ads in the phone book.
Sure, of course. Back in the old days when your ad in the
when you're up a book and looked up where the pizza place was.
Hey, Dad had a pizza shop. I know exactly what you're talking about. Had to lay out the menu and nice art for his joint. I totally know what you're talking about.
And
That's
make sure
hilarious.
the most important thing always was the phone numbers and the address. you could screw up anything else in the ad, but you couldn't get those wrong. Like
I remember the last few white pages or yellow pages in my neighborhood where I live right now. And when it was raining, like going down the block and seeing the last few houses that were still getting, the phone book delivered to their doors and stuff like that. And it was funny. One was left in the rain because clearly it was obsolete.
Of an era that's gone with the wind. It's really
yes. But again, it's an industry that was, employed a lot of people. And now it's gone.
I mean, I worked in a cubicle for a year. I was the second shift. I worked like 6 to midnight. I mean, I was like 25, so I didn't care.
Sure.
And I worked with like 50 people on that shift, and there were like double the amount of people in the day shift.
Were you selling as well as doing layouts, or were you just doing layouts?
I was taking basically the salespeople would get the clients, and then once they would go with what the clients want, I would then get that brief, and translate it into the actual computer layout and get it press ready. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I worked in the printing environments before, so I know all the terms, the terminology, and even the process of like 4-color offset printing and lithography and all of that. But I really haven't directly touched my hands in that for years, like 15 some years.
Oh, sure.
Then I left, So when I was working those jobs, they were cool, but they weren't really creative jobs.
Well, of course.
So that's when I decided, I was like, all right, I want to pursue something more creative. And I always wanted to do comic books, but I felt I needed a lot more insight on how to make and do comics. Because again, this is like 92. There's barely an internet. There weren't a lot of resources I could easily dig up. So that's when I went down to the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah. And so I studied there for about 3.5 years, and I ended up getting my master's degree from there. Which is basically, instead of going back and getting, I already graduated with a bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. So if I was going to go back to school, I was at least going to up the next level. Better use of my time.
Sure.
And so I learned all that discipline, which was great. Like, I learned all the ins and outs of computer coloring and scripting and page layout, and really like how to make a comic yourself, which was really invaluable now, because at that time, even when I was there, which was the late 90s, creator-owned comics weren't as big of a thing. Like, we do take it for granted, without Kickstarter and the interest from like Hollywood, which really hadn't quite hit yet, making your own independent comic was really difficult. And there's like 4 people you could look at that were successful, like the Ninja Turtles, the Pennies, Sergio Aragonis, and like one other person, right?
Yeah, like Dave Sim.
Yeah. And then everybody else was like, I mean, even the Image guys, their Image books were really them in the early days doing their X-Men and Marvel books, just like a different version.
Right. Yeah. Living off their reputation.
And they built up a huge following.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't until later that morphed into a self-publishing sort of haven, right?
Okay. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. I don't know if what you can do to, but it's fine if not.
I'll do my best.
And all right, no worries, buddy. I was going to ask too. So, who were your comic book influences?
Oh, well, my comic book influences are pretty broad, but the most direct ones for me are people like Walt Simonson, Mike Mignola, Jack Kirby, of course, Steve Ditko. And then some other folks in a very more iconic stand, like Darwin Cook.
Great.
It's weird because I've been a comic book reader since I was really, really young.
Sure.
I was a slow reader early on. I didn't like to read, and my parents tried everything. And the thing that hit was that I when I was really young, I have an older brother. He's 9 years older than me. I used to steal his comic books when I was super little because I liked the pictures.
Sure.
And so my parents quickly realized, okay, this is what's going to get the kid to read. So then they started buying me the Harvey books, like Richie Rich and Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Of course.
And those titles. So I started with that and then would keep stealing my older brother's books. So I'm looking at like Neil Adams Batman and like the early X-Men, the Jack Kirby X-Men stuff, while I'm reading like, Archie and his pals go to the malt shop.
Oh, yeah.
No,
that's awesome, man. That's like, I think a lot of us are like that. I enjoyed reading and my parents, exactly. They encouraged it. And my youngest nephew had trouble reading. Yeah. And I gave him comics, and it was great because, and I've told this story before, my brother-in-law was quite the jock and was trying to, kind of point his two sons in the same direction. He's like, no offense, but, the kids are more sports minded. And I'm like, well, no offense, but the kid's reading the comic book. So, and you're telling me that he doesn't like to read. Maybe this is a good thing. And literally he immediately changes. He's like, yeah, you're right. Sorry. I'm like, hey man, I'm not trying to make you, raise nerds, but they're reading.
Yeah. I mean, we forget right now, I'll talk to people when I'm in different comic book groups and drink and draw groups, and there are a lot of now 20 some artists in them, and they don't they grew up in an era without the stigma of comics are for morons. No, I mean my dad was a doctor. He was a radiologist.
Okay.
And when he noticed I was getting into comics, he was very worried, that concern about the seduction of the innocent, that it's going to twist me and make me some sort of deviant.
Jeez.
My aunt, his sister, worked for the New York State Library Association. And she was like, whatever gets a kid to read, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Reading, that's what's going to do the job. And
You're right, though.
It did. So when you talk about my artistic influences, it's really a large spectrum. The most direct ones for me are iconic people like Frank Miller or Mike Mignola, because I have a pretty developed sense of design from doing graphic design for so many years that's a natural tool or skill set that I slide into easily.
Sure.
As opposed to someone like Art Adams or Bernie Wrightson. I love both of those guys' artwork, but I cannot draw and render like they do. The amount of cross-hatching and lines and that facility, I don't have that tool in my toolbox.
I'm with you.
But I have a whole bunch of other tools, and really in comics and entertainment, it's use what you got and execute that well, and try to leave out the stuff you don't.
Of course.
People notice when you're trying something and it's not your natural fit.
What are you offering beyond the book itself in terms of, the various tiers, premiums? You're a great poster maker.
Oh yeah.
And I've always enjoyed your art. When you've done both your own thing and also your homages to mainstream comics, you've done a lot of Marvel prints and things like that are terrific.
Oh yeah. Well, okay. So some of the premiums and some of the bonus stuff. Some of the stuff I've been offering are things like convention exclusives, in the upper tiers. You can see here.
Hold on one second. I'm going to take myself out of the picture while you describe. My mouse is being finicky. Go for it.
All right. So here's an item. This is a convention exclusive sketchbook. This is an Inktober Sketchbook. Every year for October, I do the Inktober challenge where I draw 31 illustrations a day and I post them out. This was the year I did the Ninja Turtles. Every year I do a theme, and this year was Ninja Turtles. Normally I just sell this book at shows as just a convention exclusive. So I did bundle that. So that's part of what you get in the tiers, from the above the standard book tier and up.
Great.
Another item that I did, which is kind of interesting and fun, is I wanted to do sketch covers, right? But sketch covers involve, you have to get the actual cover of the book printed. So like part of your print run are blank covers and the other have your actual front cover on it. And you play that sort of hot dog versus hamburgers game of how many do I need. So with this, what I did is I made a sketchbook cover where it's like back in the day when we used to recover our old grade school books. I'd have like really like a brown paper bag that's a dust cover, and then I draw on that. So it's like, here's a blank, here's a front sketch cover, and then I have like a wraparound option where I can do like multiple characters on the book. And the nice thing is, like, if you don't particularly want the dust cover, you can always just remove it from your book, which worked out really nice because it helps keep the cost down, but everyone can get a really unique bonus item.
That's terrific, man. No, they look great. And yeah, and again, man, you've always done that. I remember when you used to do your parodies of Hello Kitty. In various superhero garb and stuff like that, and you would use cardboard to do them and stuff, and that's great. That's fantastic. Good street art kind of way to make fun art.
Well, that's something that I did integrate, that I learned from doing the convention scene for years, and that I did integrate into the Kickstarter campaign of like trying to use materials that I can get that are cost effective, like usually cheap or easy to do, and then repurpose them into some sort of premium item. With the Hello Kitties, I would use cardboard because it's literally like cheaper than Bristol board. I could go to my Best Buy near me and get like just pallets of cardboard.
Sure.
And I just cut it down and I do like a Hello Kitty piece. For those out there, it's like, this is one example. This is like a Hello Kitty Batman on cardboard. And
that's great, man.
So when I was trying to figure out for the Kickstarter like how I could do a reward, I really did want like a sketch cover because I think those are cool.
Yeah.
But you have to do the math of like, how many do I need? Like, because it costs a little bit more to do an alternate cover, but then you're like, how many will I sell? And if one is more popular than the other, you're always kind of at a loss because you're like, oh, I should have gotten more of those. And you really can't easily go back and print more blanks. Like, that's going back to press, and that's just as expensive as printing it the first time.
Of course. Absolutely, man.
So
go ahead.
So I just remembered when I was a kid, I used to cover books. Like when you were in grade school, you'd get your A&P, shopping bags and cover your math book. And if you were anybody like me, by Christmas time, I'd have to recover it again because I covered it with graffiti, like Kilroy was here and Van Halen and all that stuff. And so I was like, oh, I can do that as like the sketch dust cover.
That's really smart, man. Here's a good I'm glad you include shipping in the pledge. There's nothing more disappointing than to pledge $20 for a 64-page comic and then have to pay an additional $8 for shipping rather than knowing the cost will be $28. So I hear you. That's fair.
That's something they tell you on Kickstarter, like in the
what to do, what not to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also too, like when I interviewed all those guys, like my friends, like Henri and Trevor and Brian Brown and those guys, they told me that too. And also I know, like, cause I backed a bunch of Kickstarters for different things. And I'm like, yeah, I do have that. I do hate that whiplash of like, oh man, what do you mean you're telling me it's more?
Yeah. It's almost bait and switch. I mean, and again, that's certainly not the intent, but I can appreciate from the customer standpoint, hey man, I thought this was going to be a $20 purchase, not a $28 purchase. So I get
another little thing that can get people in trouble when you run the campaign, the shipping cost is factored in to your like Kickstarter running total.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't really sort of include it into your pledge bracket, you fall into a weird scenario of like people are pledging X number of dollars, but it's calculating also the shipment into you. But if you get people who are like, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be this much with shipping, and they bag out, then you've like your campaign's still going forward, but you're dropping people, so you're losing money that way.
Sure.
It's you're like, oh God, it becomes a weird nightmare where that's how you can get in trouble. Like that's when you see people who are like, oh yeah, I didn't figure out the shipping. I was like, yeah, man, like that's a beast.
No, I hear you, man. Is it a 64-page comic, Foot Fist Frankenstein? How many pages?
120 pages.
Nice. Attaboy. There you go.
With the bonus material in like the digital version is probably like 140 pages.
Great.
Because I could really pack in a lot of bonus material.
Yeah.
You're sort of up against the wall when you print a physical book because it's, every page, every piece of paper is like a couple cents. And as you keep going, there's like magic numbers of like, okay, 32 costs this much, 60 costs this much, 120 costs this much. As you keep going up in page numbers, there's like a threshold that you really have to hit. That's why if you read those old Marvel and DC books, there might be 17 pages of story and then the rest are ads. And then they fill in with the letters to even out their printing page for the comic.
Oh, no, I know. I know exactly what you mean. That's hilarious.
And as a kid, you're oblivious to that. You just think, well, it's a 32-page comic. It's like, well, it's a 17-page story with a whole bunch of ads for like Hulk utility belts. And then it's like a letters page, so you're like, okay.
I understand. That's awesome, man. No, that sounds great. Give people the price points for the digital and for the hard copy.
Okay, let me pull it up super quick so I can make sure. I know the digital falls into two categories. You get a basic version of the digital for $5.
Okay.
The 120-page book, which has 15 to 16 bonus pinups from a lot of different professional and indie artists, friends of mine who were really great, and they stepped up and they added a lot of cool stuff to the book. The digital deluxe version, that's at $10. That's the one we were really talking about earlier, where you get the alternative cover, you get extra bonus pinups, all the content is exclusive for the Kickstarter campaign. You get a digital version of the script, my actual working script.
Hey, great. Cool.
So a lot of people like that. I know people like process.
Absolutely.
And it's a great bonus material that you can refer to.
That's terrific, man.
That's great. The physical book, that starts at the $30 pledge level.
Okay.
But you get the $10 digital version too. So really it's a $20 book with the $10 digital version.
I'm with you. Yeah, no, that's cool.
And then you start creeping up in different levels, like the front sketchbooks, those ones, I believe, let me pull it up. They start, I want to say, I want to say they start at, the $50 and $60 level.
Okay, all right. So the wraparound is 60?
But yeah, like the blank one's 50, and then 60 is where you start getting the front cover, and you go up from there.
Okay.
In the amounts. But again, like think about it, like you're really getting a $20 book, the $10 digital version of the book. You're actually getting like a bonus sketchbook, and you're getting a front sketch cover. And
totally.
To be fair, my convention sketch rates to get a sketch from me, they start around $60. Like for what I'm giving you on the front cover, that's like my starting rate at shows.
Yeah.
So
no, that's dude, I think it's very reasonable. And again, I think you're packing
really
a lot in
there.
there.
To keep costs in mind for everybody. Then we start going up in the pledge amounts. When you start getting into like the $100, like the $150 or like $200 and $300, that's when you start getting original pages or 11x17 sketches. What I did do, and this is a really interesting thing that anyone who goes to the Fist Frankenstien Kickstarter in the comic book section on Kickstarter, if you go and you look at the pledge rewards, at the $300 level, I have 3 pieces of original art from my private collection, that I've bundled with 11 by 17 sketches. I have a John Van Fleet Superman cover.
Wow.
I have a Mike Mignola Hellboy vampire illustration that he did for, I think it was Wake the Devil.
Wow.
And then J.K. Woodward did a full color painted piece that's one of the pinups in the book. And he actually, as part of the deal we made out, he sent me the original to put in the campaign.
That's awesome.
So those are 3 pieces of, cool art that's actually literally like the John Van Fleet is actually like right above me as I'm looking at it now. Those were acquisitions I got the first 2 years I went to San Diego Comic-Con back in 98. And it was a lot easier to the prices were a lot more affordable for everybody then. So I was young and I was I didn't have any real responsibilities. I was literally working at those printing companies and living with my parents in Pennsylvania.
Sure.
So I was okay, I can drop $100 and some bucks or $200 to
get a couple things for $100 to $200 bucks.
And I looked at
what you mean, man.
Years and years, and now I'm do I want to collect original comic book art or do I want to make original comic book art? And there you go.
Well, hopefully as you progress, artist to artist, maybe you can, trade. And then, I love that. I love seeing Bill Reinhold back in the day, walking around with a Norm Brayfogle piece. And it's oh yeah, Norm and I traded. And it's I drew something for him, he drew something for me.
I think it's very nice that artists do that. I think Scotty Young said it the best. He's man, I don't want to trade art with you. If I like your art, I'll just buy it.
And I hear you, and you're right. That's true too.
Don't get me wrong. There's tons of people I'd love to have a piece of their art, and I'd totally trade for it. But unfortunately, there's an indie. It's an indie move that they all do, where they all trade art to each other, at the end of the show. And I'm man, I think we were at Zach Cruz's show. We were all there, and I think it was Peter Bagg or somebody was talking about how he would do these indie shows. And he was yeah, they want me to trade my graphic novel, my hardback graphic novel, for their indie homemade pamphlet, it's equivalent. And I'm I can sell this and make money. You can't. I love you, but I gotta be a business guy. So
no, I would respect Peter Bagg if he presented it that way.
It was hilarious because we're all sitting down eating, and he's we're all telling stories, and he asked us about cake. He asked me,
sure, the Chicago Indie Convention, which is terrific, and unfortunately would have happened last month. Actually, it's a shame. I always go there and walk around and great show,
check out stuff, and they always have cool people and cool things.
You discover people at Cake.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of artists that
they're breaking in.
I went to and I saw, and I was oh wow, this guy. I follow them now and make sure I always am on top of their stuff, which is
great mini comics, great zines, things like that.
But there also is a lot of sort of DIY jank together stuff.
Oh yeah, Kinko. Well, like I said, mini comics.
No, I don't even mean their quality. It's you'll know this, John, coming from radio, right? Bands can have a really good garage demo tape, and the production values are going to be crappy, but you can hear the quality of the band past all that noise.
Absolutely.
And then there's other stuff where this is not good. This is just not good.
Yeah. And so go on. Yeah. Tell us about your story to Bag about cake and everything.
Oh yeah. So we were just talking about that, and I said, yeah, it's really interesting. It's an interesting environment. For a lot of people, alternative and indie shows are their very first conventions.
Totally.
And many of them are art students. And so they're very proud of the products they make as part of their class, but they don't really have an understanding or a perspective of I need to sell this to keep my family fed, or this is or in Pete Bag's case, it's oh, okay, this is a thick actual book that was put out by my publisher. I have like, I don't even have that many comps if I got that many. I can't give these away.
Of
It's
course not.
literally like me taking $20, lighting it on fire. And we all just kind of laugh, going like, yeah, I get
Sure.
it. You know, it's.
No, I know what you mean, man. And also, again, the price of commission art. I mean, literally, I'm looking at my walls right now as we're talking, and I got so many things in the first 5 years of Word Balloon or prior to Word Balloon, because again, Word Balloon started in 2005,
Oh, yeah.
and I mean, I got great Norm Brayfogle was like $40 a piece for these amazing giant things, or Mike Kaluta. My favorite was Mike Kaluta on a backboard drew me this incredible shadow, and he was so sweet, knew it was a little show, and I'm like, well, how much? And he goes, well, how much are you willing to pay? And I'm like, am I insulting you with $40 for this? And he's like, not at all. And I'm like, great. And I've got this beautiful, he used a Bic ink pen to draw a shadow sketch for me. It's one of my favorite pieces. And I'm like, I have Mike Kaluta original art for a song.
That's one thing I really will say about small shows. I mean, you and I, we've gone to a ton of shows, big and small, and they're great. Like, you will get an artist, and like some artists are like slammed at big shows, and you never get a chance to talk to them or get a piece of art from them. And then like a small show, they don't have anybody around them, and you could just walk up and be like, hey, what would you like? And they're bored. They're like, I will draw you anything just to keep me from going insane at this show.
Wow. Someone's asking, is your shirt a cartoonist kayfabe shirt? That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's great, man. I love Jimmy and Ed. They're terrific, man. There you go. That's outstanding. Man, I love those guys. And I'm so glad they're doing as good as they are with their YouTube show and their podcast. Both have been on Word Balloon a few times. And I know Jim a bit better than I know Ed, but I really do love them both, and I just think they're geniuses. And I'm thrilled that, and really, again, they bring an artist perspective to their interviews. I absolutely love what they're doing.
Yeah, like I think a lot of artists definitely enjoy the perspective they bring. I used to listen to Swain and those guys podcast.
Oh yeah. Oh God, I remember that show, and shame on us for not remembering. Yeah, Swain Hunt, terrific guy, and
God damn it, archives now. I forget what it was called.
I can't remember now either.
It was a very art-driven and artist like focused podcast.
Absolutely, it was.
And I think that's what Ed and Jim bring to it, because a lot of other people, it's easier to get writers to talk.
Of course.
It's easier to ask writing questions to writers. The art side, you kind of have to have a bit of knowledge or inside info to then ask like a cogent question to a comic book artist or an illustrator.
It took a long time for me to get comfortable. I was very self-conscious about asking artists questions. And and thankfully, I always point to like Mike Ruingo was always a great guy early on in Word Balloon. That was a great sounding board of what am I doing right, what am I doing wrong. Yeah. And he was a huge help to me. I always point that out. I always think about him in August. Sadly, when he beginning of August when he passed away.
It was a shame. We lost somebody who was just super talented and such a great person.
Yes, and a great, like, willing to mentor.
Yeah.
So many, I know Scotty Young, obviously, he was one of his great mentors and everything. And that's why it was like, he found me really early, really liked what I was doing. And I'm like, can I like trouble you to like, tell me, like I said, tell me what I'm doing right. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. He's like, oh yeah, no, my pleasure. So yeah, we all miss Mike. He was amazing. And but no, back to, Cartoonist Kayfabe, really fun show.
Yeah, and it's chock full of a lot of different things people can gain. Like, I particularly did refer to, like, when Jim started launching his Kickstarter, I would go to his page because it was right before I was, like, launching mine and organizing it. And I looked at, like, the way, like, he was structuring stuff and, evaluated that and took what I felt was really effective. Because you can't compare, like you to anybody else. Like like we said earlier, you're not competing on Kickstarter with other comic books on Kickstarter.
No.
You're only really in a race with yourself.
Yeah.
Like, as hard as you work for that Kickstarter, that's the results you will get out of it.
Absolutely. Hey man, the book looks great, and I'm happy to help you out here. And again, it's Fist Frankenstein. Look for it on Kickstarter. Yeah, that's how they can search for it.
Yes, if you look in the comic book section and you go through like Fist Frankenstein, you will find it there. There's links on all my social networks. I'll be blasting those out to people every day until the end of July. So I assure you, you can follow me on Instagram at Tom Kelly Art. You can find me on Facebook under Tom Kelly in Chicago. You can
Twitter's also Tom Kelly Art.
Yes, on Tom Kelly Art. There's my website, which is my tomkellyart.deviantart.com. All of those ways will have links and posts reminding everybody that my Kickstarter, Fist Frankenstein, is going on now. It's a really fun book too. Like when you said the afternoon matinee, like that's kind of part of the influence that the book came from. Like I picked the stuff from the childhood that I liked.
Sure.
And those were like monster movies, comic books, and then kung fu theater. Like
absolutely.
The book is a fusion of all three of those things, like melded together to create like a fun Hong Kong style, like kind of monster movie. Like something I would want to watch as a kid and totally wanted to draw. I was like, okay, this was why this concept, like I worked on it for several years, like in my spare time while I was doing other stuff.
Sure.
And it was such a strong concept. I always kept wanting to come back to work on it, which is great. Like, because a lot of times you drop off, you think you have a good idea, and then you're like, no, it's like, so yeah, like, but I mean, that's the thing. Like when I say it's like John Wick meets the Hulk a la Kung Fu Theater, really what I would say is it's like Bruce Lee meets the Hulk a la Kung Fu Theater, but a lot of people don't get the Bruce Lee reference.
I understand. No, I figured, and again, that kind of fist way, obviously, is that Bruce Lee kind of ideology.
Well, so. Yeah. Somebody asked me on another podcast, they were like, "Well, what martial arts styles does your character know?" And I'm like, all of them.
Kung Fu. Yeah.
And well, no, I mean not just Kung Fu. Like
Gung Fu. I believe was but I'm saying Gung Fu with a G.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
that would be Bruce Lee incorporating all the arts and everything.
All that stuff. Because I was like, well, like Batman knows every fighting style. Like, and that was another thing. Like the world I crafted, it's a real world. It's a real like China or Japan of the feudal era, but I don't nail myself down with like specific geography.
Sure.
So it's kind of like Gotham City. Whatever needs to be there is there. And a lot of things are familiar, like, oh, it's a real city and there's like an insane asylum and a dock and mountains and a forest and all that stuff. But it's not set in a particular, like, nailed down part of the country or time period. It's just like contemporary. Like with mine, it's kind of like Conan. It's a feudal-esque time in a martial arts world that's like part Japan and part Thailand and part China. And that's cool because then I can like use all the weapons and swords and tropes from all this stuff without coming into those weird conflicts of like, well, the samurai sword wasn't invented then and you can't make that. And it's like,
no, it's a fantasy. It's a martial arts fantasy. That's terrific, man. Excellent. Very, very good. Did you watch the Bruce Lee documentary on ESPN?
I haven't seen it yet. I
gotta be honest, as someone who like has read a lot and seen a lot, it was if you're coming to it fresh without a lot of knowledge of Bruce Lee, it's great. If you've known the story, I didn't find very much that was new in it myself. Well, but that's me.
I think that's also kind of the curse because like Bruce is a legend.
Yeah.
It's that legend of like that rock star Hollywood persona who died very young.
Yeah.
And they've made, movies and several documentaries, which I've watched most of.
Exactly. No, I hear you, man. God, Dragon was on, if not last night, 2 nights ago. and I was watching it for the 100th or 150th time.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So
I did watch things like I just rewatched like the 36 Chambers.
oh sure.
A lot of Shaw Brothers films because they're up on Netflix. So I
Absolutely.
put those in,
Speaking of Netflix, have you watched, and I don't know if it's still there or not, but they had a great documentary about the Kung Fu movies coming to America.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
its influence on both the urban culture, but just in general, like running in grindhouses and everything. I can't remember the name of it. It was excellent, though.
I've seen a bunch of them. I think there was two. There was one that was like it talks about all the like action stars of that era, like Cynthia Rothrock and
yes,
things like that. And then the other one sort of like the cross-cultural impact.
Exactly.
How, and we do forget that. Like a lot of people do forget that like until Bruce Lee showed up, and then when he did show up, like the impact was huge. I mean, that's when Daredevil started fighting ninjas.
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
That's when you get characters like Jim Kelly and, we forget, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was one of Bruce's students. That's why he's in the movie.
Yeah, Game of Death. I know, it's so funny. I mean, and again, really cool. Not only him, but obviously Chuck Norris as well, but James Coburn was another student of his.
Like
and
John Saxon.
Of course, John Saxon, absolutely. And
Colburn,
it is.
Colburn was too.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. All the different Hollywood stars of the 60s that really were his students as well. And really respected him.
Yeah. And those were elements I actually took and put into the book.
Cool.
So it's like there's no one style that rules them all. Parts of it, parts of the story are very similar to The Legend of Kung Fu, the David Carradine TV show that really was a Bruce Lee TV show.
Right.
But they wouldn't let Bruce be on camera for some insane reason.
Yeah, well, or they just didn't think it would sell.
Right.
Which, again, I did. James Garner was a Bruce Lee student. Yeah. And I love that Philip Marlowe movie he made that Bruce Lee is in.
Oh, so,
yeah. It's amazing the influence that he had while he was around and of course certainly afterwards as well. It's fascinating.
I always loved and got into his workout regimen. I was always an athlete when I was younger. In high school and college I did collegiate wrestling, and I would look at his workout books for how many push-ups and sit-ups he would do a day, and his how much he would run and how he would he kept that log in his training regimen, and you're just yeah, this is why this guy's a beast. He's just doing it.
Well, and as a boxing fan, I was always oh man. And I know, believe me, that he used his entire body and everything to fight, but his punching was so fast.
Oh, the one-inch punch. Punch that you can see on YouTube. You can go and you can watch it literally twitch. And then knock a guy 5 feet back into a chair, and you're like, what the hell just happened?
Well, that's why I would have loved to have seen him fight at either welterweight or middleweight. And I think of some of the dream matches, and it's he would have destroyed these people. He absolutely would have destroyed these people.
And that particular was what influenced me when I first got the inception to make this Fist Frankenstein book. Because I would read Hulk comics or Superman comics, and they're bruisers. They don't fight. They don't have a skill.
They don't have technique. Yeah,
they just kind of lumber in. I thought, what if the Hulk could fight like Bruce Lee? That'd be amazing. And I want to read that book. And so I was okay, I will do that. And then of course I'm well, Marvel isn't picking up the phone for me, so I'll make my own. And I looked up and I'm well, Frankenstein's public domain, so is the Frankenstein monster. So I can have some name recognition that people kind of know, but I can still morph it into what I want to do.
So is it your version of a Mary Shelley, or I should say, is it the Mary Shelley Frankenstein in a Kung Fu world, or is this an original character that is very much Frankenstein-esque?
It is a Mary Shelley Frankenstein in a Kung Fu world. I worked on the premise of this is what happens after the end of Mary Shelley's book.
Right, he goes off. Yes, he does. He
sort of wanders the earth, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like Kane in Kung Fu, absolutely.
This is where I'm picking up.
Very good.
He looks very different, but most Hollywood versions aren't even the Mary Shelley descriptions in the book.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so when I was crafting the style and the visual look of the character, I didn't feel to hold myself captive, like by what had come before, rather like to draw that like that universal Herman Munster style.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Jack Pierce.
Right. The Hammer horror films, like Christopher Lee one.
Sure.
So
De Niro in his.
De Niro, or like the one that's in Van Helsing. And,
yes. How about The Bride? My personal favorite. Yeah. Honestly, that really is of the non-Universal and Hammer films. I like The Bride. I think The Bride, it's a very 80s movie, but I think The Bride is a very good movie, Frank.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many really fun, cool takes with Frankenstein and the Frankenstein monster. I mean, like Young Frankenstein, like that's a different looking Frankenstein, and it's hilarious and awesome. Sure. But it's still like it's having fun with the Universal films, but it's still its own, like got its own flavor.
Oh, it's a genius. No, it's a beautiful movie, and it's the designs and incorporating the way Peter Boyle really looked into the monster and stuff is incredible. No, it's I think it's an excellent Frankenstein movie. Absolutely.
So like when I was like designing, my Frankenstein, my character, I was like, okay, end of Mary Shelley's book. Now he's wandering the earth, and he's going to, because like he's sick of humanity at that point,
right?
So he just wants a place to be happy and find peace, and so I have him wandering around Tibet and finding him like a Shaolin style monastery, and so. That's where the story begins. Like that's where my story begins.
Interesting. Very cool, man.
Bad guys show up, and
of course,
stuff happens. And that's why I said like it's also a revenge book, because he finds peace and the world sort of intrudes, and humanity's ugly side shows up again and forces him to have to go off and use his now newfound skills to avenge, the loss of peace and stillness that he had.
Interesting.
Which is a very martial arts trope, and it's actually like very similar to like what happens in John Wick. So I was like, guys, it's I'm just telling you a fun story. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel.
Sounds great, man. There you go. Fist Frankenstein. The Kickstarter campaign. When does it wrap up, dude?
It wraps up on August 4th.
Okay, good.
There was the 4th of July weekend.
Sure.
I extended it 4 days past the end of July.
Okay, great. That's excellent, man. All right. Well, there's time to back Tom's book, and it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's super fun.
So there you go. No, both digitally and yeah. So if you're part of the international audience and this intrigues you, you might want to consider grabbing the digital book. And it sounds like Tom has loaded it with a lot of bonus stuff. But if you're in the lower 48, consider the hardcover, and hey, if you can spare it and stuff, you saw the wraparound covers, and among the great premiums.
And like I said too, even if you are an international customer and you are interested in any of this stuff, contact me on the Kickstarter page, and I'll work with you. I just didn't want to promise X number of shipping like right ahead, and then have to do like what would appear to be like a bait and switch to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I just want transparency and not to create, bad karma with anybody. But I get it. Anybody, if you want one of those rewards, I'll work out the shipping with you and send it off. Like I got no problem with that.
Sounds good, dude. Well done. Continued success. I hope to see you face to face. I mean, things are opening up again in Illinois, so
Well, we'll get there. It's just we just got to be patient. That's
absolutely. I agree. I agree. Thanks a lot for coming on. Congratulations, and all the best on this fun campaign for a very, very fun sounding book. Fist Frankenstein. Say that fast 3 times. Exactly. Yeah. From Tom Kelly. Thank you, dude. Well done.
Thank you, man.
Absolutely. And thank you all for watching today on Word Balloon. And we'll be back in a few hours if you're watching live with a great conversation. I am happy to welcome Elliot S. Maggin back, the great DC writer for many years. He has a podcast. He's got a brand new podcast. We'll be talking about that as well and some of his classic runs. And later this week, I'm going to be welcoming back Greg Rucka, because The Old Guard, another great action story, a great comic book from Image, he and Leandro Fernandez. The Netflix movie debuts on Friday, and we have pre-recorded a talk about the movie, so I suggest you watch the movie first before you either watch our video or listen to the audio. But that's coming this weekend. And we will also have, in a couple weeks, a Word Balloon Live with Greg so that you can interact with him, talk about that. He also wrapped up his Lois Lane story and has some other things in the hopper. So we'll talk about those things live with Greg in a couple weeks, but enjoy our conversation about The Old Guard, a recap of the movie coming this weekend on Word Balloon. Thanks a lot for watching, and thank you, as always, for paying attention to what we do here. As I always end every